You know what? It's been absolutely unacceptably hot lately. So, the best thing to do is to come inside, cool down, and enjoy one of the many awesome Xbox titles on offer this week. We've got masochistic card collectors, tabletop space dramas, and ultra-violent sports sims. But first, let's sink our teeth into something a little more primal. The Far Cry games are all about stacking the odds against the player, pitting them against an enemy who is much bigger and better armed than they are. But Primal pushes things to a whole other level by asking them to do so with nothing but sticks and stones. Literally. Set in the Stone Age, this ingenious spin-off reimagines the mountainous settings from Far Cry 4 as a place of warring tribes and wildebeests. In this era, you're pretty much at the bottom of the food chain, so you'll have to fight smart if you don't want your remains to end up in a history museum next to a placard that says, "Stone Age man who got absolutely bodied by a mammoth." It's a really clever way to reinvent the series, and it's 67% off this week, while those seeking a more conventional Far Cry experience can pick up the 5th game from Xbox Game Pass.
In Ring of Pain, you wake up in the middle of a ring of cards, and also, as the name would suggest, of pain. This card collecting dungeon crawler is all about picking your battles, as you try to make it out of the strange, cavernous place in which you find yourself. You can try to sneak past the enemy or take them head on. You can pick the path of least resistance or fight your way along the one that's going to turn up the most treasure, but whichever direction you go in, make no mistake, there will be pain. Thanks to the wealth of upgrades to build out your character with and the Moorish roguelike structure, Ring of Pain will have you going round and round for a long time to come. And if you pick it up this week, you can make the price tag less painful with a 40% discount.
Them kids in Nexomon really know how to while away those lazy summer afternoons by capturing a series of increasingly powerful monsters and training them to compete not only with other local teenagers, but against the nefarious forces that threaten their entire world. You know, kid stuff. If you've been trying to catch them all since 1996, then this turn-based RPG is sure to hit the spot. It features hundreds of different monsters to capture and train, each with their own elemental types and weaknesses. There are legendary mons to track down, 10 vibrant regions to explore, and a fella called the Nexomon King who seems to be cooking up all kinds of Nexomon trouble. Nexomon is now 30% off.
Citizen Sleeper takes place in the Badlands on the outer fringe of civilized society. You might be living in a time of spaceships and cyborgs, but things still get pretty rough and tumble in this lawless part of the world. And as a synthetic person on the run from their corporate overlords, you've got more than your fair share of things to worry about. Like starvation, for example. Fail to keep your artificial body pumped full of the right supplements, and it will quickly start to fall apart. So you'll need to get a job and earn some dough, although that will detract from the time you get to spend exploring the game's glitteringly gloomy world and meeting all of the interesting oddballs that populate it, which is kind of a bummer. So Citizen Sleeper becomes all about making the tough choices. Do you push further on your latest adventure and risk regretting it the next day, or do you play it safe and just pick up another bar shift? Will you risk your own health to help out a friend, or stab them in the back to give yourself a leg up? There are no easy choices, and no two playthroughs of Citizen Sleeper will play out quite the same. So grab it now from Xbox Game Pass or with this week's 20% discount to find out about how your own story will go.
Yeah, at first, the whodunit at the centre of Tangle Tower seems pretty straightforward. Freya Fellow has been stabbed, and a shady-looking figure was found standing over the body, holding a knife. It's all very open and shut until you realise the subject is just a painting, and it's going to take a whole lot more detective work to get to the bottom of this one. Fortunately, doing so gives you a great excuse to interact with the interesting folks that call Tangle Tower home. Thanks to some stellar artwork, hilarious dialogue, and expertly delivered voice acting, each of these conversations is sure to leave you smiling, whether or not they actually bring you any closer to solving the homicide in question. Basically, point-and-click fans should waste no time pointing at Tangle Tower and clicking on the buy button, especially now that it's 35% off.
If you're a horror gamer who has been craving an old-school survival experience like a zombie craves brains, Heaven Dust could be just the game for you. Heavily inspired by the likes of Resident Evil, the game's story concerns a group of scientists who found a rare blood virus over in New Guinea and decided to sling some of it over to a mansion in the States and poke about it a bit. Their experiments resulted in a massive zombie outbreak, as these experiments so often do. And now you've found yourself trapped at the very heart of it as the disaster unfolds. It's a pretty grim state of affairs, but if you manage your resources right, pick your shots and solve some puzzles, you might just make it to one of the game's multiple endings. Although there's no guarantee that any of them are what you would call happy. On the upside, Heaven Dust has had a 40% chunk bitten off its price tag in this week's sale.
Yeah, and if one creepy mansion just isn't enough for you, this week's sale also includes Tandem, A Tale of Shadows. A famed magician has gone missing, and it's up to a young girl and her teddy bear to find out what happened to poor Mr. Kane. And I don't think Rosebud will be the answer this time around. The really innovative thing about Tandem is that you can switch between the two characters on the fly, with each of them playing from different perspectives. Emma searches for clues from a top-down viewpoint, while her fuzzy friend Fenton does some side-scrolling. It's an intriguing two-pronged approach, which makes the game's gloomy world even more exciting to explore, even if you might not like everything you uncover along the way. Plus, it's essentially 2 games for the price of 1. Or make that 1/2 actually, now that Tandem, A Tale of Shadows is also 50% off.
They say that music can change the world, and Wandersong's silly little bard is here to prove them right. This gorgeous musical platformer transports you to a handcrafted world, which seems like it may be on the brink of catastrophe, so it's up to you to sing it back to safety. Using the melodic tones of our bard's magical voice, you'll be able to fend off enemies, delight your friends, and generally make things a whole lot groovier. Plus, there's a dance button. Just a button that makes you dance. It's a sort of game that you can't play without smiling, although it also manages to delve into some of the deeper emotions in a way that's sure to stay with you long after the final note has been played. And while you can't put a price on the transcendent experience of music, we actually have. And that price is now 75% off.
Way before the term startup was a thing, Battle Brothers has you trying to get your very own business venture off the ground by forming a unit of ferocious mercenaries. On the surface, it seems pretty simple. Just wander across the game's procedurally generated world until you find a town and then some locals to recruit. Only be careful who you hire. Each character has their own traits and backstory, so it's worth considering whether you want a disgraced nobleman with a drinking problem to lead the line. And you might also want to avoid getting too close to your colleagues, since this is a permadeath game, so anyone you lose is gone for good. Or at least you'd better hope they are. Undead employees aside, this tactical fantasy game will test your mettle and your management skills in equal measure, and it's now 35% off.
Today's sports simulations achieve an incredible level of authenticity, using complex physics engines, detailed player models, and intricate AIs to replicate the real thing as closely as possible. And it's great, but sometimes you really just want to bash a few buttons and clobber your way across the field, and that's where Super Blood Hockey excels. This arcade-style ice hockey game takes place in a nihilistic future, where criminals are forced to compete in no-holds-barred blood sports for the entertainment of their peers. It's a rough deal, but an excellent premise for a game full of guts, gore, and savage stick-based violence, and also the occasional bit of hockey. You can lead your own team to the championship in single player or take on your buddies in local multiplayer, but either way, you can guarantee that the laughs will be flowing as freely as the red stuff. Now 75% off, Super Blood Hockey is a reminder of a simpler, much less civilized time.
Whether you fend off the heat by spending some time on the ice or taking a trip back to the Stone Age, we've got you covered with this week's awesome selection of deals. Let us know what you're planning on picking up down in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for all the latest Xbox wheelings and dealings. Bye!